one of the things I don't think we think about often is the long-term ramifications of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if I think about 20 years of covert action in the GWAT and where we ended and left Afghanistan for in 21, what would we say it was worth it back then? Like if that was, so I think problem definition and then defining what success looks like is what I would like to see policymakers say. So what's the problem we're trying to solve here with this covert action program? How do we define what success looks like at the end of the day? And are we going to devote the resources to it that are necessary to achieve that determined success outcome? Covert action in Afghanistan began because we wanted to go find bin Laden. We had no real other definition of success than that. We had the whole Soviet war there to watch what was going to happen to anybody that tried to change the culture and change the
there was a pretty good case study.
There was a case study already right there. In fact, we had participated in the case study.
Yep.
Right. And so at some level, the outcome shouldn't have surprised anybody, particularly when you figure out we didn't have good definition of success going into there. We had some tactical ones along the way, obviously, but we didn't have like a real definition of it. At the end of the day, we would be proud for this thing to have happened. And so at the end of it, I don't think we were proud of what had happened.
Yeah. It's, I think a lot of people grapple with questions of, was it worth it? Or was my efforts worth it? Was the loss of life worth it? Was the loss of treasure worth it? You know, depending on what angle you're looking at it from.
Right.
You know,
I would counsel anybody that's worried about their effort, like they've got to come to grips with their own morals, their own ethos about that. But if you had signed up to do a thing and you were tasked to do those things and you were obedient to doing those things, then you can hold your head up proud as having served honorably in that role. It may not have led to the outcome that you now know you wished it had, but that's a different discussion. That's a foresight you didn't have going back into that time. So I think, definition of problem definition followed by definition of success with resources aligned to ensure success would be the main thing I'd want policymakers to look at. The second thing I'd love for them to take a better peek at would be unintended consequences, right? We have historically removed despots from power. Rarely have we had a better person take over.
Interesting. We can look at Gaddafi in Libya. We can look at a lot of different places in Central and South America, actually, from early influence programs in the 50s and 60s that the CIA conducted. Guatemala, I mean, you can go on cia.gov/archives and just type in Guatemala. Holy cow.
Yes.
It is.
Same thing with Chile.
Yeah.
You can
super interesting stuff.
Yes.
And I mean, there's a lot of people that have to live a very hard life today because of, like you said, some of those unintended consequences.
50 years ago. And so if you think about nature abhors a vacuum, right? We better be prepared for what actually happens when that vacuum of leadership is created, right? And what are the unintended consequences? Who are the people you've vetted to fill that vacuum, and how do they treat people? Because sometimes that enemy you knew may actually be a better choice than the unknown that follows. Yeah,
it is hard to know, but just know that when you participate in regime change, you're playing with fire.
But I think that gets back to those definitions of success again, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think it would have been stupid for us to think if a definition of success for Afghanistan would have been the application of democracy in Afghanistan, I think that also would have been a silly definition of success, right? So
a definition of success has to be achievable.
Has to be achievable, and culturally, the cultural context matters significantly, right? So those would be the two things I think I'd like to see policymakers focus on prior to greenlighting significant covert action programs.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful, and we could apply that across our entire foreign policy, really. Those things both apply.
That's because that's all intelligence collection and covert action is. It's just another foreign policy tool. That's why we call it the third option, right? The first option being, diplomacy, the second option being warfare, and the third option being intelligence or covert action.
Yeah, it's really, it is interesting. And that's actually a whole other podcast at some point, diving into how those interact with each other, actually, because rarely do any of them happen in a silo. Right. So you're a professor, and you're teaching the next generation, and you focus on intelligence studies. Is there any uncomfortable case studies that you give your students, or any ethical lines that students struggle with the most that you present to them? I'm curious some of the tools, I guess, that you use.
Yeah, no, so way back earlier in this podcast, we talked about our successes are unknown, our failures are legion.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the case studies I use are about failures because that's the information I can teach from.
Mm-hmm.
And so oftentimes those are uncomfortable. We get to talk about, what's learned from them. But, when we talk about, the overthrow of Iran in 1953 by Kermit Roosevelt, right? That's what set up ultimately the Iranian Revolution and the capture of the Americans and the failed Delta rescue and the mullahs in Iran. And so it's uncomfortable to talk about. Americans don't like to talk about failure. We like to talk about success.
Unless you're a Minnesota Vikings fan, then you are obsessive about the 1998 missed field goal that would have sent you to the field goal. But I mean, that's a whole other thing.
Or a Buffalo Bills fan in any year. But and then we do talk a lot about the ethics of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're as a CIA officer, you're taught to lie, cheat, and steal.
Mm-hmm.
Lie, cheat, and steal, but you're doing it for a righteous cause.
Mm-hmm.
And so we unpack in some of the classes. We talk about just intelligence, leveraging the theory of just war to talk about just intelligence and the impacts on culture.
So it really is maybe a more front and center question for the everyday case officer of, do the ends justify the means?
Has to be.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember when I specifically remember confronting it when I worked on a covert action program that was going to result in people losing their lives. And I had to decide did I trust the leaders making the decisions? Did I trust the folks making the tactical level decisions? Where did the scales balance on this? Because people were going to die as a result of these things. And I had a role in that chain that I had to decide, could I play or not? And I think everybody in the intelligence community has to come to their own moment of understanding the real why of what they're doing and the moral and ethical questions that apply here.
Yeah, I can't even imagine the almost unlimited amount of scenarios that would make somebody come face to face with their, call it your come to Jesus moment. You know, it's. I mean,
you're even at his base level, you're convincing somebody to commit treason against their own government at risk of their death.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a weighty thing to carry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And
especially if you have emotional intelligence and are capable of empathy and capable of imagining yourself in those shoes and what it would take for you to do that against your own country, your own countrymen. Oh.
And there are lots of people who have died as a result of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not just some theoretical ethical problem you're grappling with. It's real. And so I think every officer who has high emotional intelligence and is worth their salt has had to grapple with that at some point along the way, or multiple points.
Yeah, the longer you do it, right, the more you're going to likely come face to face with it.
Yes.